Hello and welcome to the ASL Season 10 Post-Draft Rankings with me, TCP, and today I'm with Ilkid, one of the new coaches for this season.
Thank you for the introduction. Hey everybody, how you doing? This is the Illinois kid, and here to do some power rankings. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, going into this, we have some rankings from Ian as well on the document. He was not able to show up because I woke up late, and we'll have to move on without him. But his rankings are down below, and we can start with Brad's team, the St. Louis Samurats. So he has Aegislash, Gliscor, Kirim Regular, Azumarill, Crobat, Zoroark, Chestnut, I don't know why I blanked on Chestnut, Espeon, Mega Audino, Torkoal, Electrode, and Venusaur. How do you feel about this team, Hill?
All right, I'll take it off. So right off the bat, what I like to start on is cores. I find the three essentials are the DFS, the Firewater Grass, and the Psychic Dark Fighting. I actually like those three a lot, and it's what I look at whenever I centralize my power rankings. When I look at DFS, it's extremely solid. It's got a lot of offense and a lot of defense with Aegislash, Kirim, and Azumarill. I don't know why I just blanked on Azumarill. I find that to be very solid. I find that to be a really nice mixture of bulk and offensive. It's a bit conventional with things like Kirim and Azumarill, but it still gets results nonetheless. I also I like the Dark Psychic Fighting as well for the most part. I usually like that to be just a blatantly offensive core, but you fit in some defense with Chestnut as well. Not loving the Firewater Grass core, though. I get that you wanted to draft like Sun Venusaur for a gimmick on your team, but I think that whenever you draft gimmicks, you shouldn't be kind of crippling some centerpieces on your team like Azumarill. I don't think Kirim necessarily appreciates fire either, because the dragon's supposed to make fire a neutrality, not a weakness. But other than that, this team has 2 Stealth Rockers, I believe. Yes, 2 Stealth Rockers. It's got decent amount of hazard removal with a couple good defoggers and a good rapid spinner. And then spikes with Chestnut too. So in the hazard department, it's okay. In the core department, I find it okay. And with some cool offensive synergy with things like Espeon and Aegislash pairing pretty well together. And a decent enough like fighting type and fire for Pokey Steels. I actually do take quite concern with Audino on this team. I don't usually like bad megas, and especially whenever you already have something like a Azumarill.
So I guess I'll talk about where I feel about that, because I actually kind of think that Audino is kind of a central part of this team, simply because...
Middle of the road, C to C minus D.
Oh, wait. Oh, you cut out for me for a little bit. Oh.
I just said it was an essential, like, just essential C to C minus kind of middle of the road team.
Okay, so I actually do like the Mega Audino pick a little bit. I think if you have to go low with your Mega, I think Mega Audino is one of the better ones to pick up. And specifically, I think it helps out with a... When I look at teams, I kind of look at cores myself, but I also look at how specific like common type coverages kind of affect this team. And if you're looking at like common fight coverages, like so if you have like Fairy and Psychic is very common typing because a lot of Psychic types have varied moves and a lot of Fairy moves or Fairymons have Psychic moves. So with Mega Audino, you'll find this with like Ground Rock, Water and Ice. Mega Audino just comes in on all of those, and I think it's quite solid for patching up just like general. If you have a problem with a mon, Mega Audino is probably okay against it. So that's why I think Mega Audino is actually pretty okay for this. And moving on, I actually do like how Gliscor and Kirim and Aegislash work together. I
agree.
I think actually from this entire team, Gliscor is like the centralized part of it, whereas like there's gonna be weaknesses if you don't bring Gliscor. If it's like on the setting up hazards department, on the getting rid of hazards department, on the like defensively checking something or even offensively doing something, Glasgow is like literally the do-all mon on this team, and that's sometimes a problem when you run into what happens when my Glasgow dies. Because I think this team really falls apart when Glasgow dies.
And how do you think Crobat makes sense on a team that's centralized around Gliscor then?
Crobat? I think Crobat is just a solid mon. I know someone like Brad will probably use it a lot more bulky than someone like more offensively minded, thinking like, because Brave Bird, obviously flying spam is a very important part of like draft, and Gliscor in itself is probably the best banded Brave Bird mon just because of its speed tier and like how things can't take flying hits on these teams much anymore. So I think that it's a fine mon. I have no real strong opinions on it being very good or very bad on this team. I do think it will have a hard time being a centralized hazard remover, though.
Looks like a fun team.
It really does. So, moving on, we have Altaria Motives, aka Ian's team. And I think this team is actually really good. So before the draft happened, or not before the draft, but before this video happened, I ranked all the teams in order, and pretty much where I put Brad's team, I'm going back to that for a little bit, is that was like the borderline between mid-tier teams and like high-tier teams. And this is definitely like above Brad's team in the fact that it's so, how do I explain it? It's so threatening offensively, and it has a lot of value pick mons. And when you have a lot of value picks and a lot of threatening mons that work together, it's usually just a recipe for being really strong. So you're looking at like Mega Garchomp. We haven't seen Mega Garchomp before, but Mega Garchomp is definitely a threat in Tier D, especially without HP Ice. You have Tapu Lele, who's come back with Hawlucha. And Hawlucha has had major buffs in this generation with Close Combat and Brave Bird. And then you have, I think actually Moltres is probably the centralized part of this team, because this team does have a little bit of a problem where specifically with the top 5 mons. So this is something that I look into a little bit more, and I'll explain a bit more of what I think about drafts. When you look at those top 5 mons, you really want those top 5 mons to be mons that you can bring every single game. And if you're bringing specifically Ian's 5 every single game, you're going to have some problems with like fighting type coverage, with fairy type coverage, with ground type coverage. And Moltres is usually like the cure-all for everything that those top 5 seem to have problems with. So I actually think that Moltres is probably a centralized part of this team, and that can be good or bad if you have a centralized part of your team being Moltres. What do you think?
Okay, so I quite like this team as well. I have it rated pretty high as well. Yes, I did. Okay. I really did like this team a lot because, like you said, like Lele's dominant. I mean, it's back, and now it's going to fear us even more because it's giving us a buff to Lucio with Psychic Seed to sweep us with Unburden. Excellent wall breaking stuff. It actually has some synergy with Sand, right? Like it's got so much going for it. I pretty much like everything until I see Ariados and on. Cannot stand the last 3 picks on this team. Definitely weighed it down. Webs was not needed. I hate all 3 of those mods behind it in general. But everything else is super solid. I can even see like usage for Meloetta. Like I understand he has Lele, and personally, I don't really usually like doubling up on like bulkier psychic types. But Meloetta still makes sense on this team to sort of help cope with the minor fighting weakness that this team can have. I wouldn't even say minor. It's got like 4 weaknesses. It's pretty major. But it's got good things to complement it, right? Like it's got quad resistant to fighting, by the way, and it's got really strong stab with Lele between Psychic or Moonblast. It's got Meloetta to chunk those hits as well. Meloetta can take some close combats. And overall, yeah, I really appreciate this team. I think you had a really great point with Moltres. I didn't actually see before you actually said that. That's actually a super good point. And, Gigalith, as it looks kind of strange, works. And it gives Garchomp that very threatening stand force. It's going to be such a fun team to watch and a very fun team to play with, I feel. Just hate those last three is my only thoughts.
Okay.
My only thoughts to add is I hate those last three.
So moving on, we have our first newcomer coach, Sora with the Underwood Umbreons, and he drafted a very threatening offensive lineup with Sand, with Excadrill, Mega T-Tar. He has Thunderous T, who has moved down to Tier B. That rhymed. And Dracovish, which is a mon that I think is very scary to prep against, but I'm not sure how good it is. I know you had some thoughts about Dracovish coming into this, right?
I did, right? I definitely did. Why is this thing so low in tiers? I don't get it. This mon, Choice Banded, with Tough Claws, can always, without a doubt, two-shot Toxapex with a resisted attack. What other Pokemon can do that in this game? Like, that is ridiculous. That with an unresisted, like Excroak, obviously two-shot Toxapex specifically, but can hit you with an unresisted attack that hard on basically anything and almost force a life against basically any form of stall. I mean, it's super good. I think it's way better than Tier C. But enough of my gripes. More on this. You're right. This team is pure offense, man. It's so much offensive utility. It's got so many different ways to hit very hard. It's got good speed control with semi-sand. Double ground was super solid too. Not really, I don't believe sharing any weaknesses, which is really solid between his dragon and his secondary dragons. Actually got two dragons on this team. Again, complement each other very well. They don't really share any weaknesses. So it's like whenever you double up on typings, I generally like it whenever they don't share any weaknesses or they share little weaknesses. And I think he did that very well with the Excadrill Flygon Dracovish core. Volt turn on this team is okay, I think. Or is it? No, this was the one that actually was really good because I forgot that Glaceon and like I kind of forget about Baton Pass sometimes. Whenever you count Baton Pass, the team has the same Volt turn. It's got like 8 things that can get out. I love Volt turns personally, and I think this team has a lot of it. So really all over the place there, but I like the Volt turn on this team. And the only gripe I really have with it is it just does not have a ton of defense. I mean, it's got a defensive core of things like Sylveon, Orbeetle, Glaceon, like Delmise. Like these mons are good, but they're not like, straight up walls. And Sylveon can Wish Pass and take a lot of hits and stick around for a while. That's probably one of the only mons that this team has that can boast that can say that they can defensively check things consistently. A lot of these things are more of just bulky pivots, like maybe Delmise or Orbeetle. And Fret's just bad. So, but everything else is really solid. I even like Glaceon. I don't usually like Glaceon in draft, but I really like Glaceon.
I actually think that the bulk of Mega T-Tar is pretty good for this team for just taking hits. But in terms of a sand component, Mega T-Tar and Excadrill, that's only going to give you, like 3 turns to actually do stuff with Excadrill and sand? Which could be enough if you are immediately switching from Mega T-Tar to Excadrill. But you'll find that, like, if you're switching from Mega T-Tar to Excadrill, something with a fighting coverage is coming in. If they're swapping into Mega T-Tar, they're probably swapping in with a fighting coverage. If Mega T-Tar dies, it's probably because it dies to a fighting coverage. It's a bit iffy. Like, Mega T-Tar and Excadrill on paper seems okay, but the sand component is actually very gimmicky with that, from my experience. And I actually think that there's a specific type coverage that is very annoying for this team, which is fighting and ice coverage. Specifically on fighting types when they have something like Drain Punch and Ice Punch, or something along those lines. Whereas you have the Sylveon, and that's pretty much I guess the Salazzle one is okay with swapping into that. But those 2 coverage moves just hit every single thing, and it's a bit scary for Sora to prep around that. I actually think that Obstagoon and Mega T-Tar very much clash on what they want to do. Whereas Obstagoon, I guess, can Parting Shot, and that's an upside for Obstagoon. But both of them are physical breakers around the same speed tier that want to come in and click coverage moves that are going to slowly chip down your team. I think that's something that might be a problem later on.
Also, I hate how this team only has 2 Stealth Rockers.
2 Stealth Rockers in Excadrill and...
T-Tar.
And T-Tar. Oh yeah, both of those don't really want to bring Stealth Rocks either.
Oh, they do not. I really don't like that. Yeah. Overall, pretty solid, I think. Moving on to Shadow.
I really hate this team.
All right. I gave it the C rating.
And I gave it the C.
Because you know what? You know what? It has offense that is really threatening. Like, really threatening. And it's got Volt Turn to get into that threatening offense. It just has no bulk whatsoever, pretty much.
Yeah.
It's got Latias.
This is like
Sand Slash.
Typical Shadow for me. Like, I look at this team, I look at each individual Mons, and I'm like, Shadow would draft this. I was literally talking about this in when the draft was happening, and I'm going, if a Mon is hype, Shadow will pick it. And then he immediately picked Galarian Darmanitan, which was kind of predictable as the first pick. He picked Mega Beedrill, who's pretty hype. He picked Bunny Firemon, that I'm blanking on the name of. He picked 2 starters, a bunch of new Mons, and it's so freaking offense and it's so Shadow that I think it's gonna fail again. I think that I think even week 1 has already happened, and I think the major flaw to this team has already been revealed. Whereas it is fast, it's very offensive, but literally you can bring 6 Scarfers on this team and you'll have no problem. And like he doesn't have swap-ins. Like rock coverage, how does he swap into rock coverage? It's probably Sand Slash. How does he swap into Ice Beam and Scald? It's probably, I don't even know. This team just like falls apart if it gets hit with moves, and it really, really needs the momentum to win the game. And I just don't think that it will work.
5 ice weaknesses and like 2-3 resists. Ugly. And those 2 resist are Darmanitan and Lucario.
Which aren't really resists.
They are not. I think the Volt Turn can work with like Lucario though, because okay, so Galarian Darmanitan, right? I think one of its number 1 problems is anything that can take Icicle Crash. So bulkier fires, bulkier steels. And specifically with bulkier steels, like can U-turn out with things like Beedrill and Darm to pressure them with Lucario and Cinderace. Fire is not that common, but still, I mean, it's still Darmanitan still gets.
You're cutting out a little bit. Okay, I'll mention something else. Psychic Fairy Spam is also...
Wants to. You may be right. We'll see.
Okay. You cut out there for a little bit, so I was talking a little bit about Psychic Fairy Spam being also very annoying for this team. Because anything that wants to swap into a Psychic type move doesn't want to swap into a Fairy type move. Anything that wants to swap into a Fairy type move doesn't want to swap into a Psychic type move.
Actually, a good point. Am I better now? Sorry, but am I?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I was just saying, like, Volt Turn's good for Lucario to pressure steals. That's about it. That's literally it.
Okay.
No, you're good. That's all the point I had. I mentioned the ice weakness, which was huge.
Now,
all right,
I'm biased on my team, honestly.
Fair. I mean, we all liked it.
Yeah. I do think that there is a little bit of problems with swapping into something with Fairy and Ice coverage, or Fairy and Fire coverage. and knockoff is kind of a problem for me. But I really like my team.
I'm sorry, knockoff is a problem for everybody. Like that's a move. It's a virtual problem for basically no Pokemon's like, yeah, I want to lose mine.
Yeah,
No,
but
I don't. What were you saying?
specifically for me, I think my team has a lot of targets for knockoff. Like Latios doesn't want to take a knockoff. Tapu Fini doesn't want to lose his leftovers. Cursula doesn't want to take a knockoff. Gligar doesn't want to lose its Eviolite. Ditto doesn't want to lose its item in general. And I think that's what I was picking up when I was looking at my team, personally.
Scizor is such a good switch in a knockoff, and dark types for the most part. But I guess dark types like Zoroark with like fire coverage would suck.
Exactly.
I get what you're saying. I definitely get what you're saying. I don't know. It's like whenever you say a team's weak to Bolt Beam. Like I think a lot of teams are gonna be weak to Bolt Beam. But yeah, you want me to start, or do you want to?
Yeah.
Do you have any more thoughts that you wanted to add?
You can go.
Okay. All right. You already mentioned the whole thing about knockoff with Cursula. I actually don't know how I feel about Cursula as a Pokemon yet. I have played a league game versus it in a previous league that I tried starting, my ATA. I don't know how it's going to function on this team. I don't know. I understand that's a super solid offensive piece. I really get that. And that might be all it is, but I think you already nailed it in the head when you say you don't have a lot that switches in on things Cursula doesn't want to take. Like, I think Gengar has a solid matchup versus you. Like something like Gengar, just a really offensive Ghost or really offensive Dark, as you said before with fire coverage, can do some work, you know? And I think that Cursula might kind of be like an anchor that you're either going to love or hate in the season. But phenomenal top three. I think you have the best DFS core in the league, period. I don't think we're getting any better than Tapu Fini, Latios, and Mega Scizor. That's the best. Like, it's good value, it's good everything. Like, it's super solid all around. As for like touching on more of like Fire, Water, Grass, I think that it's like a good value one because again, you got like Finny, which is great, Roserade, which is really good, and then Typhlosion, which is very at times. I mean, I understand the fear of like Choice Specs Eruption. I just don't think it's going to be like something you go to every week. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But Alolan Persian adds a lot of really nice utility to this team as well. I really wanted to bring up that it's actually super solid for parting shot and things like that. Because there's like Roserade, Kinkelder, these things have really high offensive stats and have good bulk stats, but they want to use it sparingly, if that makes sense. Like, you're not like, oh, this thing is about to hit me with a close combat. I have to go into Roserade, or this is about to hit me with like a waterfall, you know, something neutral for Conkeldurr. You don't want to take that hit, but you will if you're already in on it. I guess I'm trying to explain if that makes sense. It's like not a switch in. It's more of like an offensive pivot is what I like to say.
Yeah.
Like and such. So I think Alolan Persian weakening those attacks so you can get those Pokemon in a bit more freely is going to make you feel a lot better. Gligar 2 is in the same principle. Touch on the Dark Fighting Psychic Core yet? Because it's really solid, the Dark Fighting Psychic Core. Again, that utility with Alolan Persian. Kinkelder is amazing. Latios is amazing. There's really not like your bottom two to me are weird, but there's nothing like a ton wrong with this team. It's just usually generally solid. I usually hate lower tier Pokemon in general. It's just a kind of the way I view it. I think you need to have a lot of value in your lower tier personally.
Yeah. It's a reasonable expectation. For me, I think this will probably come up later, so I'll talk about it a little bit now.
Dude, I had a hot rate substantial offense. What's up?
But specifically for low tiers, like the last 3 E tier picks, what you really want from low tiers is either something that is very unique in what it does. It's very utility-based mon. That's what I was thinking with Alolan Graveler. Or no, not Graveler.
Golem.
Or something that will sometimes be very useful in what it does. Like Typhlosion Eruption is not always going to be the best thing to bring, but sometimes Typhlosion Eruption just kills every single thing. Same thing that I'm thinking with Regice is sometimes if I'm dealing with something like a Gengar, you might say, I might need the 200 Spadef to just swap in and take a hit and force them to switch out or something like that. So that's what I was thinking with low tiers. But you'll see a lot of low tiers where either this is where you pick up, should pick up like utility mons that will be good for like really good for like 1 or 2 games, or like you'll see a lot of meme picks here. So in the past we saw Furret, which is not really a pick, I don't think, and we'll see some more going into the future.
I know, but in the way it means, I'm just going to count off for him because it's a PR. Like this team with Maractus. God, I hate Maractus. I'm gonna count off for it. Even if it's a meme. Like I understand the point of it, but I'm gonna count off for it. It's just a PR. But yeah, overall solid team that last one. Now on to Static.
Yeah, this is actually, personally, I think this is my favorite team. If you don't, so usually when I'm looking at teams, I just don't bother looking at the low tiers. So I rated this a little bit higher than not looking at the low tiers. I was also expecting Ian to be here, so instead of double, there's a Wooloo on the screen. Damn it, Ian. Let's see, where was I going with that? But Maractus is definitely not the best grass type. I definitely see where that is, because there's literally a Leafeon still able to be picked up. But we'll move on from that, because it does get spikes. I actually think that this has the most solid core 4 mons that are just coming every single game in Tapu Koko, Hydreigon, Nidoking, and Bronzong. If you bring these 4 every single game, you're gonna be fine. Every time. And then you have the choice of, oh, is this a Hitmonlee game? Oh, is this a Gastrodon game? Oh, is this a Mega Bayonet game? Oh, is this a Volcarona Sweep and Win game? Oh, is this a Cloyster Sweep and Win game? And while Cloyster is usually a really weird pick, I think for this team, I think it works. And I think that in itself, when you have really big setup sweepers like Volcarona and Cloyster, which needs a lot of prep, not having to bring Volcarona and Cloyster when you have another solid 4 that you can just rely on is really good. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, okay. How do you feel about that base 130 to base 100 speed tier gap?
The speed tier gap.
It's Koko to Volcarona, if I'm correct. Base 130 to 100. I hate it.
I guess that's something that I wasn't really thinking about.
I genuinely hate that. I don't like that at all. That's a pretty strong word, but still, I don't like it. I don't like it. And there's 2 defensive pokes on this team, and then there's 2 on this team because Togetic is not as bulky as most people think. Although I think people are starting to realize that, because I don't know, but like whenever I was doing leagues like a couple seasons ago, I was like talking with I think these are good players too, and they were talking about how Togetic is really bulky. Disagree with that. I have not seen double in action really yet. I only saw Wolfie pass a Swords Dance to his Dracovish and win the game. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of potential for that on this team with like Koko and even Hydreigon and stuff. It's got 2 really defensive mons in Bronzong and Gastrodon. It's got double and it's got Togetic. And I'm pretty sure that's about it for like the defensive core. Pretty sure it's about it. And I don't like that. That's not enough bulk. This is very glass cannony for me. I guess that would, I mean, that, and that's really just going to be where it is, because he was right. I mean, you can almost bring this top 6 almost every week and just do so well on a week-to-week basis. I mean, I
Oh, you cut out a little bit.
not totally coming in like there can be end games where there's no answer for this thing with its like endure sets, with the unburdened endure set, get like an attack boost, maybe with just a strong banded set with close combat. There's a lot of like utility with Hitmonlee. I don't mind this team's Volt Turn. It's got okay amounts of Volt Turn. I don't mind it at all. It's pretty good. And overall, Koko's barely a fairy type, but nice little DFS core there. Am I still good, by the way, audio-wise?
There was a little bit of cutout, but you're good now.
Okay. So, like, I was talking about, like, the DFS core.
Yep.
I was like, yeah, and then Firewater Grass, I love 2, hate 1 with Maractus down there. And pretty offensive Dark Fighting Psychic core with Bronzong not really getting a lot of Psychic coverage in general. We'll get Psychic and stuff.
I do think that when you're talking about the bulk of this team, I think that when you're looking at bulk, Tapu Koko, Hydreigon, and Volcarona, they do have a versatility where they can be bulky or they can just be purely offensive. They have the option to be bulky, and I think that's something that's specifically, this is more of a bulky offense type of team, in my opinion, from just what I see of it. And I think that option to switch between more bulky to check something to more offensive to kill stuff is very nice in the draft league format.
It's just so like you're okay with the lack of walls in a sense. Like you're all right with the lack of like defense and in the way of like walls, and you're more okay with like the bulky offense of it. Because in that sense, I do agree. But it's just I think that it's still good to have a defensive backbone. I
think that Volcarona with like is good bulky, being a defensive, more like a defensive wall with Roost, with Flame Body, procs, threatening fighting types, for instance. With Hydreigon, I think Hydreigon is pretty commonly run more bulky, at least from the way I use it. And I think that's very solid options. Tapu Koko, no. It's not as bulky, but we'll see Roost on it a lot of times with Calm Mind if it's running a Calm Mind set. And that can just become very threatening very quick, but the same kind of threatening that Volcarona has. So maybe not as prevalent for this team, but still pretty good.
Another thing I was going to bring up is just not too many Stealth Rockers on this team either.
Stealth Rockers. Yeah, you're right there.
King. It's got King, Bronzong, and maybe Cloyster? I think Cloyster, actually.
Cloyster gets Spikes and...
Stealth Rocks?
Stealth Rocks, yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Yep, so 3 there. I like a bit more than 3 usually. But
Maractus gets Spikes. Like I'll say again.
Yeah, say it one more time for everybody. What does Maractus get?
Spikes. And Spiky Shield.
Wow. It spikes? Okay. Very How many spikes move for Maractus?
But then you also have to bring a Maractus, so there's upsides and downsides to everything. So next we're moving on to Wolverine, who I think was also very solid in its picks. I think it has a lot of value picks, and when you're looking at teams and it has a lot of value picks and it synergizes okay to decently well, I think that's just this makeup of a very solid team. And this is definitely in the better teams for me. Do you want to go for a little bit and then I can finish it off?
Sure. This was actually, I think this is my top 5. Yeah, this is my top 5. This is one of my top 5 teams. Really like it. I had to play it week 1. It was a nightmare to prep for. Really solid. Really solid. Like I can tell the team really centralizes around Zygarde and Mega Kang. At any point, by the way, just stop me if my audio cuts off. I think that those two are really centralized around this team quite well. Personally, I think Suicune is a super nice addition with Zygarde. Because Zygarde's really fearing Suicune's really just a take all anything kind of mon. It's really fearing ice. Suicune's got you. Metagross got you. Metagross is solid too because it's a dragon resist for Zygarde. I think this team has a lot of really good defensive synergy too. Because Metagross can be really bulky. Galarian Weezing, as I said before, Suicune, and Musharna. I forgot about Musharna initially. I won't lie. When I first looked at this team, forgot about Musharna initially, but it's not horrible. It's really not. It's a quite value pick, and I think it can definitely soak up some choice tax like strong.
Okay, I'm gonna cut you off there because there's a bit of that going on. Okay, so this is something that I noticed is similar to how with Ian's team, where Moltres was kind of like a centralized figure of Ian's team. I really think Galarian Weezing is a centralized mon on this team in particular, simply because when you look at this team, or when I look at this team, I mentioned it in a past team where if a fighting ice coverage, where it's like Drain Punch, Ice Punch, is coming against this team, Galarian Weezing is solid for that. Things like Let's see, what do I have? Bulky grass types coming. Galarian Weezing is pretty good against that, because bulky grass types do like to come for the Zygarde, they do like to come for the Suicune, they do like to come for the Kang, and the Serperior too. But Galarian Weezing is like a fix-all to a lot of the bulky problems that this team is going to have with breaking through bulk. So I think that it's a very centralized mon on this team. But the problem that I think that will happen with this team that's a little bit of a problem, is that because it's so grounded, I think if a team is going to have real time struggling with toxic spikes, it's going to be this team. Because if Galarian Weezing is a very centralized mon on this part, that means like Arbok's not coming. And I know Galarian Weezing has defog, but like toxic spikes really, really annoys this team a lot. And that's why, at least for me, I actually think that, so transactions for week 1 has already happened. For this team in particular, Suicune was picked up in the replacement of Milotic. And I actually think that Milotic was a lot more solid when dealing with toxic spikes or something like that, for the Marvel scale, for the fact that it usually runs Flame Orb and doesn't need to worry about getting poisoned if it comes in early enough in the game. And that's a choice that I personally wouldn't have gone for Suicune for Milotic. But what do you think about that trade?
No, I totally agree with you. I think that Milotic was by far the most annoying thing to prep for on this team. It's really hard to kill, and it's centralized with a really strong Wish Passer. You can say the same about Suicune, but Milotic doesn't need as many turns to survive. It doesn't need to be clicking rest and sleep talks and stuff like that. It can just click recover. It can double its defenses with a burn and just click recover and spam that. And it's got enough resistances on this team to just do that. Because it's weak to electric and it's weak to grass. It's got enough covered on this team and then some for electric and grass types. So yeah, I think Milotic was a lot more solid on this team than Suicune. It actually took this team from a B+ to a B for me. Cores, though, I like Zygarde 50, Metagross, and the Galarian Weezing a lot, just together, in a sense. They cover each other's weaknesses really well and hit opposing things probably even better. I think that this had the overall like best cores with like Suicune, Superior, Blaziken, like best value kind of cores.
Yeah.
I was hating on the Dark type earlier, but then I actually went to prep against him. I actually quite like Spirit Tomb on this particular team as a centralizing like spin blocker, and just to deal with like more offensive psychic types. So it doesn't in case you're not going to bring Musharna and Metagross get worn down by something else, Spirit Tomb's a good answer. So there's just options with this team. I agree with you on Arbok, though. It might not have been the best pick, considering Galarian Weezing is on this team, and it's so important. And Volt turned not bad.
So moving on, we have Kurt. And if I don't understand... If there's a draft on here that I'm not going to understand how good this team is, or how good a team is going to be, it's going to be this one. Because I feel like this team has a lot of, like, good mons that kind of look like they'll synergize together, but I don't know if they will. That's my big thing. I don't know if this team is going to work, because I really think that Amoonguss, Corviknight, and Silvally, I think that's a really solid 3, but I've never seen a core quite like that, and I'm not sure if it will actually work in practice. Other than that, what do I have? Let's see. Freeze Dry is a bit of a problem for this team for swapping into it. Silvally can do it, but other than that, and Audino can do it pretty well. But other than that, nothing really wants to switch into a Freeze Dry, which isn't the most common move, but it's something that he'll eventually have to deal with. And a lot of new mons with Corviknight, with Dragazult, and with Toxtricity and Galarian Rapidash, which I think will be either a blessing or a curse, simply because when you're experimenting with new mons, the level of usage that they get out of the first season that they're drafted is usually either way below where they're supposed to be or way above where they're supposed to be, due to either people having a difficult time prepping for it or people having a different time prepping with it. Um, so this is probably the weirdest team for me. What do you think?
Dude, I'm the power rank meanie. I'm consistently ranking these teams lower than you guys. But whatever. I hate these speed tiers. That is my first thing right off the bat. Keldeo is the fastest Pokemon at base 108 speed. That is so slow. That is so slow. I also never like doubling up on typings. Usually, I'm not gonna say never. Usually, I said it before. I liked it before. Right here, I'm not too big of a fan. There's so many typings that are doubled up on. The electric was so unnecessary too with Dracozolt and Toxtricity. I understand Toxtricity is really trying to click Boom Burst, but it still has that defensive typing, and that's pretty hard for it. Double poisoned. I don't like doubling up on the typings. I don't like the speed tiers. But you're right about the Corviknight, Amoonguss, and Silvally. Little of that in the defensive core. It's gonna be weird. We're gonna see how it works. It's mobile. It's a mobile core with U-turn, parting shot, U-turn, because Silvally gets both. It's it's all right. I mean, its offense it's got Landers, which is the Swiss Army knife of draft. It's got offense where I think it needs it. It's got defense where I think it needs it. It's overall just an average team. I just don't like the speed tiers. I see a little bit of defensive utility. I see a little bit of offensive synergy as well. Because wouldn't you say like Landorus and Galarian Rapidash should be pretty good together? And like Keldeo too. I find those three to be very solid.
Yeah, I actually haven't done too much research into what Galarian Rapidash really wants to do, but in the past, Tier D Psychic Fairymons have been very strong, specifically Gardevoir. So I don't know if Galarian Rapidash will meet up to that expectation, but I think it has a chance of being really solid, especially with this.
It still has access to Will-O-Wisp, I believe, and it's got I tried to switch my Melmetal on it, and I got two shot by a horsepower, and I cried a little bit. Yeah, that's my thoughts really. It's actually got a decent amount of rockers too. It's only got 3 actually. Never mind.
So moving on, we have your team. I think this is the most consistently high-rated team. I think this is either... I was having a hard time debating whether this was my favorite team or my second favorite team, because something with this team is, when you have like a core 3 or a core 4 that really wants to come to every single game, that's really threatening. And this team has Tangrowth, Rotom Wash, and Infernape. And I think while Infernape and Tangrowth are very versatile, Rotom is just solid. And with a team that's pretty offensive, I think those 3 are just going to be this is the backbone of the team. And I think it's one of the strongest, if not, one of the strongest. I don't know if it's the strongest core that has been drafted. Deoxys Speed makes, specifically, the aspect of... So a lot of drafts these days have become a lot more offensive in nature, and speed control is a very big thing now. Specifically, Deoxys Speed just being faster than every single other thing is something that's really nice. And we haven't seen Deoxys Speed be abused since it was abused with abused with Z moves in the season 4 by Excellent Name. And I'm really excited to see it come back with Z moves being gone, instead of being like the crutch of Deoxys Speed, putting it back onto an equal playing field with everything else. Other than that, I think the main weakness of this team is Copperajah. I think there's a lot of parts of this team that relies on Copperajah to swap into specific things. Specifically, something like Moonblast spam is something that Copperajah is one of the main things to deal with. Garbodor is also there too. But Copperajah is, I don't think, going to take multiple hits very well. And what was the other one? Oh yeah, in dragon coverage. Dragon coverage I think is quite strong against this team, specifically because Comfey is the fairy. You run into things like people might want to bring outrage a bit more against this team, and outrage is just a really, really strong move if you don't have a fairy or a solid steel type to deal with it. And I don't know if Comfey and Kaparaja are the most reliable fairies and steels that will want to deal with something like an outrage. Do you have anything to say about your own team?
I'll keep it brief because it is my own team and I'm not trying to get too much of my bias out. I wanted to touch on that fairy weakness and say, GG, you got me. In general, yeah, you're right. Caparage is I'm usually generally relying on Tangrowth's massive defensive stat and mediocre special defense stat, maybe boosted by an assault vest, to help me versus fairy spam. I think I deal with it a lot better offensively than I do defensively, though. So I do believe I will concede on the fairy weakness. The dragon, however, I would like to stand my ground because there are not a lot of dragons that can get past Comfey. I've been looking around the league and I've been running a lot of calcs. There are even choice steel moves that Comfey can take really well. And for those like more offensive dragons that want to take me on, and if they're physical, I'd like to see him try to take on Mudsdale. There's really only one dragon that I'm like terribly worried about in this league. And funny enough, it's Dragalge. And I dropped him for my team. Funnily enough, I think it's actually a good Dragalge. And also, you know what? I'll be honest. This is a very, very, very low tier Dragon Fairy Steel Core. I really put emphasis on my Fire, Water, Grass, and I really put emphasis on my Dark Psychic Fighting. The Dragon Fairy Steel Core was drafted in a row. It was kind of a little later in the draft, but I wouldn't say panicky. I knew what I wanted, but I had to pick up some pieces, and this is what I did. And then I won't say much else on. I think Frost Axe is just good to add hazards as well as Garbodor. And then Grandmaster's Angus, come for your soul. Hands down. That's all I got to say.
Okay. I have no clue who Grandmaster Zang is.
Angus. Grandmaster Zangoose. Yeah, Grandmaster. I named him Grandmaster week 1, and I like the nickname. I'm going to keep it.
Okay.
Love that Zeraora, right?
Melone. I actually think that Melone actually sent me his team for me to draft for him, and I already saw that there was some problems with specifically ground types. I think this team is going to have major problems with ground types. Specifically with having Trevenant and Rotom Frost being the main mons that want to swap into. Specifically because this is something I mentioned a little bit earlier, but ground types usually have rock type moves. And if you're judging between whether he's going to click for a rock type move or he's going to click for a ground type move, this team is probably the team that's going to struggle with it and is probably going to suffer because of it. And I think that Mega Charizard Y, it being the fire flying type that can't run boots, is going to be quite scary. So Rocks is still open season on this team, specifically because its hazard removal isn't even that great either. And one last thing is with the Doug Trio pick. Why does this team need Doug Trio? Like, Doug Trio is a niche mon, and I don't understand why it's here. Maybe for speed tiers. Actually, it's probably for speed tiers, but like, I think it's a weak part of this team.
It can trap, right?
Yeah.
This team gets like ruined by a good rock type. Dark Trio's like, no, you can't switch out now.
I guess so.
There's one. I mean, I agree. I think I agree with every single one of your points. I think that Charizard and Heatran sucks. Genuinely, not good. I like Trevenant and Sun though. You mentioned that Trevenant and Sun. I like Trevenant and Sun with Harvest and stuff. Good value there. Jellicent doesn't necessarily like Sun. Just really Trevenant. And then Hatterene's kind of undiscovered, you know. I don't really know how I would run Hatterene personally. I don't see like it. I don't think it's defensive enough to be a wall. It's really slow, and I think really its best set's going to be Trick Room, Life Orb, 3 attacks. And running that every week is going to get predictable and it's going to get old.
Yeah. But Psychic Fairy coverage is really strong. Like Tier D, Gardevoir has always been a threat in Tier D. So I think the coverage alone is something to look out for Hatterene. But it being the slowest one of now the 3 of them that are in that tier is interesting because it does have the magic bounce aspect of it, which is interesting, I think.
How do you like Scrafty on this team?
Scrafty. I don't really have any notes on Scrafty in particular. It's not really... It is one of the main setup sweepers. It's Fighting Dark. I'm not sure. I don't really have an opinion on Scrafty right now.
Yeah, we have to see. We'd have to see for sure. You're right, though. It is one of the main setup sweepers, and whenever Scrafty is one of your main setup sweepers, ugh, yikes. I think this thing's best set's like AV, personally. But you know, it's whatever. You already move on to the next team?
Yep.
Thermal. Wow. I was the nicest to Thermal.
Probably one of the only teams where you were higher than both me and Ian.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy.
This team is going to have a problem with choice band and choice specs. It is guaranteed going to have a problem with choice band and choice specs. Because it has a bunch of bulk, it has a bunch of swap-ins, but when you add on that 1.5 multiplier, those swap-ins and those bulk start to crumble. And then you have to deal with the aspect of trick and switcheroo, and then it's just like, come on, these are just the 2 best items to bring against this team, and it's obvious. Like, that is a problem.
Taunt too.
Taunt too, yeah.
And Volt Turn is good against this team as well. Just getting your correct switch-ins, like Mandibuzz and Necrozma being weak to Volt Turn, being some of your main defensive pieces. I don't like that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's good. That's the main thing with this team, but it's like very egregious. Like, the main thing that is threatening about this team though is lots of bulky setup. And not necessarily a way to stop the bulky setup. So like when you think about like bulk up or curse or what's the last one? Calm Mind. You have Clefable, probably one of the better ones. One of the better Calm Mind mons, one of the better what was it? Cosmic Power mons. One of the mons that can use that. You have another Cosmic Power mon in Necrozma, you have another Calm Mind mon in Mega Sableye, you have another Calm Mind and Curse mon in Porygon 2. There's a lot of bulky setup that if you don't prepare for it, you're going to have a good chance of losing. But the problem is, that is the main thing to prepare for.
And I'll say another thing. This is probably the first time I'll ever be making this statement. But the fastest mod on this team is a Alolan Raichu. I think it's a base 115 or something like that. And the second fastest Pokemon on this team is Mandibuzz at base 80.
It says a lot.
That says so much. Necrozma's base 79, 1 point under. So your second fastest Pokemon is Mandibuzz.
This team is definitely going to find some problems, and it's going to probably run Trick Room a good bit. But you know what else Trick Room sucks against? Trick Room also sucks against Taunt. So Taunt, Choice Band, Choice Specs, Trick, you win the game. Easy.
Hey, it's hard to kill. It's D+ for me.
Mace.
All right.
Mace is probably the second one where I've seen a team like this, but I don't know if it's going to work with this coach. This is definitely a very coach-dependent draft on making this kind of team work. Do you want to start going with this one?
I like teams that can make Mew utilize all of its sets. But I don't know if you agree with this, but I feel Mew is very pigeonholed into a defensive sets on this team.
Yeah.
Feel that way. I think that it is probably your consistent best Ice Beam switch in, barring Magnezone.
Mm-hmm. I think so. This is something that I find specifically for Komodo teams, because Komodo has a bunch of really strong offensive options. It has really good special coverage, it has really good physical coverage, and it has the ways to set up both special on the special side and the physical side. So usually Komodo is going to be very good at it. There's been a new meta more for it being more utility with Stealth Rocks, and that's also a really good set. But I think this team has the problem of Komodo is a centralized mon on this team. And that's not something you want of Komodo. Because you don't want Komodo being the mon that you want to swap into attacks, because you want Komodo to be the one to set up and win the game. So things like, specifically, ground rock coverage, once again, is Komodo is good at swapping into rock type hits, but it doesn't want to swap into rock type hits. It really doesn't if it wants to set up to win the game. So now you're looking at mons like Palossand to swap into them, Magnezone to swap into them, and they have their own problems of Palossand not being the most or the best defensive mon. You have Magnezone not even wanting to take an Earthquake. You have Tapu Bulu to mitigate that a little bit. But then you have to look at, like, I think this team would have very much been helpful of Inteleon being... No, Inteleon's one of the better offensive mon. Maybe Lycanroc Dusk is the mon that needs to be a bulky water type to
And
help
do you
out.
think this team needs? Do you think this team needs a rock type?
Let's see.
I'm very middle opinioned on it, to be honest. I can see why I would like it. I can see why I wouldn't, because flying types can do pretty well. I mean, it's got those three like Inteleon, Magnezone, and Lycanroc. But other than like those three, flying types do really well, and they pressure Komodo and Tapu Bulu. And Komodo and Tapu Bulu also share an ice weakness, which Magnezone and Lycanroc can deal with offensively. Magnezone can also deal with it defensively.
Okay.
I don't know.
That makes sense. But let's see, I'm going through my notes, and there's one more thing that I didn't bring up. Is specifically with hazard removal, you have Mew, Talonflame, and Venomoth, I think, as your hazard removal. And I think Mew's the only one that wants to bring Defog. Like, Talonflame can bring Defog with the boots now, but I don't think Talonflame wants to bring Defog with the boots.
Neither does Venomoth, and Mew is going to run Defog like every week on this team, which is why I said it's so pigeonholed into a defensive set, which I definitely don't like. Also, I love how you said that it needs a bulky water when you totally forgot about Walrein, because Walrein sucks.
And the last note I have is specifically going back to the Komodo point, where it doesn't want to be the one to swap into rock types, even though it seems like the most obvious swap into rock types. On a similar note, swapping into fire type moves is another problem with this team, because you do have Komodo and you do have Talonflame, but neither of them want to swap into a fire type move. Like, I guess Walrein also has Thick Fat, so I guess it's still a resist, but if you bring in like a Choice Banded Flare Blitz, nothing wants to swap in.
Yeah, no, you're right. Wow, I was looking for it as you were saying it, but no, that's very right. It does not have very many solid fire resists at all. It just has really Komodo. And Magnezone being that key ice factor, it's so fire and ice is super solid versus this team as well as rock. Pretty good though. I still don't mind it. Various apples.
So I think this team on paper, if you first look at it, it doesn't look bad, because you have a lot of value picks. And then you start looking at it a little bit more, and you notice like 6 rock type weaknesses, right? And like 2 resists.
I could not have said that better myself. That was a perfect synopsis of this team. That was perfect. I was literally gonna say that same exact thing. Yeah, no, and you got even the rock weakness thing. Like you literally took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, this. It's got 6 Mons taking super effective stealth rock damage on one team. Could you imagine?
And I understand that boots is an item now, but running 6 boots.
Yo, you could run a whole team with heavy duty boots, all 6 Mons.
But in that sense, with rock type going to be such a coverage, such a like prevalent coverage move that's going to come against this team, because if you don't bring rock type coverage against this team, you're kind of dumb. Not gonna lie. I'm probably gonna eat my words somewhere along the lines here from that, but Jirachi is actually the one like saving grace of this mon, kind of ironically, because it's like the wish mon. Because Jirachi, its versatility is not necessarily hindered because it can still be run the offensive and defensive sets that it wants to run. But like, Jirachi is so good as a steel type, and teams like this is what's gonna like push that to the limit. Because if Jirachi doesn't perform every game, this team is going to have problems. But if Jirachi does perform into this game, then it starts to get a little bit harder to deal with.
How do you feel about Starmie and Pikamuku?
Starmie and Pikamuku. I think Starmie is a very value pick mon for this team. There being 3 water types is probably not the best idea. But Starmie, as on its own as a tier C mon, I think is a top tier C mon. But it's not a top tier on this team with the tripling up on water coverage or on water types, doubling up on psychic types with your most important mon being doubled up with Starmie is a bit of a problem. Especially because this is something I'm going to bring up again. The top 5 mons are the top 5 mons you want to bring most weeks, and this team has a lot of shared weaknesses specifically within its top 5s. Things like ground coverage, things like rock coverage, things like ghost coverage, things like dark coverage, and that's not good.
3 dark weaknesses just in the top 5.
No resist.
That's a yikes.
And that might lead into a problem of now you can only bring 3 to 4 of your top 5 mons every single game.
I mean, you're bringing Hitmontop a lot, actually.
Yeah.
It's the rapid spin. I mean, Starmie's got rapid spin too, but Hitmontop likes rapid spin a lot more. And well, I guess with the speed boost, maybe Starmie wouldn't mind it now. But like, it's the rapid spin, it's the dark resist, it's the rock resist. It's like okay against ghosts. Yeah, you're bringing Hitmontop a lot. Dang. You have anything else?
No, but on the Hitmontop point, from my experience with Hitmontop, it's one of those mons that it will die in the beginning to the middle of the game. And once it dies, because this team is relying on it, from what you pointed out, there's going to be more problems. That's why I think a lot of us found problems with this team in particular.
Oh, I hear you. I definitely hear you. I definitely did. Cannot stand the doubling up on typings with this team in particular. And so many weaknesses too. You really hit it on the head. Plus Avalok sucks, so at me.
And last we have Peaches, the main one that actually changed in the middle of us doing these rankings. And it changed a lot.
This might be a B for me now, but I kept it at the B-.
So
for now.
This team before definitely had problems with the speed tiers, with that kind of stuff. But adding a base 100, a base 108, and base 110 does help with that speed gap between what was previously I'm blanking on its name. The dragon type that's base 143. Dragapult, and what was the next fastest?
It was Durant, I believe.
Yeah, it was Durant. And that speed gap fixing up is very nice. I think that specifically with before when it had Rotom Heat, the problem with Rotom Heat is that if it is on a really good team with a really solid core, it is really, really good. Things like Rotom Heat Jirachi, that is really solid. But when it's not, it's just going to die over and over and over again. It is just going to die because its coverage is so freaking good and it's so good at pivoting and it's so good at Will-O-Wisping. But if it doesn't have the right mons, it's just going to swap into an attack and die early on in the game and not being as influential as it could be. Now you have Manaphy. Manaphy is a very offensive threat. It can be a defensive threat with Calm Mind, Rest, Hydration, Rain Dance kind of stuff. It no longer has the ability to Z Rain Dance for speed boost and Tail Glow to win the game, but it is still a really, really solid water type mon. I think it has a lot of utility, specifically on what the kind of things it wants to do with this team in particular, because this team did have a problem earlier with ground and rock coverage. And maybe I didn't move it up as much as it should have been moved up from how it is now. But let's see. I don't have too much bad to say about it. But I think that a lot of these mons or some of these mons are on the lower tier of the mons, or like the tiers that they're picked in. Like Mega Aggron is a solid steel type. But is it the most solid steel type in tier B? Is it worth having a Mega Aggron when Mega Steelix is in tier D? I'm not sure for this team. Manaphy is actually good now. I'll move on from that point, but Breloom is like the question mark mon I think this team, because I think Breloom has a lot of potential. I think it has a lot of offensive and defensive ability. I just don't know if it can be used successfully in draft, specifically for Peaches.
I liked it a lot better when Rotom Heat was on the team.
You did?
One of Breloom's biggest issues is a defensive grass type, because it's immune to its spore. It can pretty much come in for free. I don't really know the rules on Fury Cutter, but it's not that great in general. It like things like Amoonguss, things like Tangrowth, adding you right now, Peaches, and things like other things like just other bulkier grasses just come in on this thing pretty easily and do what they want to do. Delphox is now your answer to that, and I don't know why people give Delphox as much flack as it gets. Actually, I think Delphox and Breloom could be a nice little cool 1-2 punch combo for the lower tier offensive course, but still could be. I don't really know. I would need to see it. It's not something I can definitely like bet on. You talk about like Drapion at all? I think
no.
It's honestly, I mean, I always like a grounded poison, and I always like a dark type. And to get that in one mod is fantastic for value, but Drapion always just seems meh to me. Its offense, its defensive capabilities, it's always just middle of the road meh. I never am like, oh man, thank God I have Drapion right here. It's more of like I have Drapion, I can absorb toxic spikes, I can pressure with knockoff. But I'm never too impressed with Drapion personally. You're right on the changes really helping. Oh, what's up?
I do think that there is a upside to Drapion, specifically not its offensive capabilities, but specifically for its T-Spike abilities with Mega Aggron with Manaphy, because I think they really like the T-Spike support. I think Drapion's going to be a good mon to provide it.
That's a solid point, yeah, for sure. Because this team, how many defaults does this team have? It just has 2, right? Togekiss and Mantine?
Togekiss, Mantine,
and then a Rapid Spinner and Claydol.
It's a pretty good hazard removal.
I mean, I personally don't, and this is just a personal thing, I personally never like drafting mons. I like being able to bring all 12 of my mons whenever I want to. I don't think you can bring Manaphy and Togekiss together. That's a personal tick off for me. Also, with it's it's all right. I mean, I personally just don't like Claydol, but I can also see it working on this on a core with like Mega Aggron. It's ground immunity. It's a nice fighting resist. It's not terrible, and especially Mega Aggron, and it adds to the seldom rockers on this team. Just being that Mega Aggron, the Kecleon, and the Claydol, I believe. Am I missing one?
Kecleon, Aggron, Claydol.
That's about it. Yep. And then
Those
Toxic
are
Spike
the
and
rankings.
Drapion.
Toxic Spike and
Drapion. Yep. Also feel Dragapult's moderately supported with this team. I think it can be put on a better team, but I think this particular team really patches up its weaknesses to some extent. It's got a lot of weaknesses to cover too. It doesn't have like 6 weaknesses in total, maybe 5.
Dark.
It's got a lot of
Psychic,
weaknesses to cover.
Fire, or no, not fire. Dark Psychic, or Dark, Ghost, Dragon, Fairy,
Ice.
Ice.
I think you got it. Dark, Ghost, Dragon, Fairy, Ice. Yeah, 5. And he's got a solid resist for literally all those typings. So that's good.
It's
Maybe
definitely-
Dark.
I
No, I
think
got Tokies.
it's a solid. It doesn't look the strongest from my perspective, but it's definitely very solid. I think Claydol actually has been helped out a lot because I think Claydol used to be in a position where it was a centralized mon on this team, and I think it was similar to Hitmontop, where because it doesn't have the most reliable recovery, it only really has rest and I think pain split. It doesn't really want to be in a position where it needs to swap into the ground and rock type coverage, which it used to have to do before when Rotom Heat was one of the ground immunities, but not the not at all rock swapping. So I think Claydol used to be in a position where it was very pivotal to bring every game for the resists that it provided, and now it's not so much, which I think is a better role for it.
Yeah, I agree.
So
That's all I had.
finally, we have the final rankings of where everyone placed based on the averages. Ilkid, me and you were top 2. We're draft
Sup?
analysts for reasons, I guess. And Ian was number 3, so I guess we're obviously the masters of draft.
We're just biased. We're just biased.
Only a little bit. Then we have disclaimer. These rankings were objective. There is nothing. There's nothing wrong with these rankings. They're perfect. Everything we've said is perfect. Mons is objective, and we've objectively solved these drafts. There you go. And I've never lied in my life. Anyways, moving on. So we have Chicago Granbills, which I think was... I'm blanking on the name. These Woodland Weebles, which was Peaches, ranking 5th. Oh, wait, Chicago Granbills. That was Wolverine. Underwood Umbreons, which was Sora, ranking at 6th. Then we moved to the mid-tier Bs, which was Static, Mace, and
Kurt.
And then we have the
Kurt Buzzle.
teams that
Is that
are
right,
a little
number
bit
9?
lower. Even though I think Brad's team is good, it's ranked at 10th. And then we have the teams that seem to have obvious problems, at least for me, and I think for us. Shadow wasn't as agreed on, I don't think. But Melone, Shadow, Thermal, and various apples in the low tier. And I think that's
Yeah,
all.
and that would be all the rankings. Hey, if you disagree with us, please talk to us about it. We're more than happy to tell you you're wrong. No, I'm kidding. But we love conversation. That's what this game's about, right? It's about talking. It's about battling. It's about learning with each other. And if you have any points that we might have missed, or you have anything you want to talk to us about, we have a whole Discord chat. We have DMs. Please talk to us. Reach out to us. Tell us why you disagree. We can have a good conversation about it. And I know that these guys are all super nice about team building. I myself have messaged like 3 of you guys about helping me out with certain sets that I had in mind, and I appreciate all that. I really like this ASL community, and I think that we put on a okay power rankings for you guys. And if you disagree, please let us know.
I couldn't say it better myself. Okay, I think that's all from us here at the ASL. I forget how I usually end these videos, so we're just going to end it off here. See you later.
This Altaria.